The rain that night in Seoul wasn't the soft, gentle kind. It was a relentless, icy downpour that made the neon signs of the city bleed into the wet streets like watercolor paintings. It was the kind of rain that urged you to hurry home, to seek the comfort of a warm room and a soft light. For Zola, that was the only thought on her mind. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, a useless shield against the chill, and clutched the small paper bag from the all-night convenience store. Her shift at the little flower shop, Sunny Petals, had ended late, and the long bus ride home still lay ahead. She took a shortcut through a narrow alley, one she usually avoided, but the rain was a powerful persuader and her feet were tired. The alley was poorly lit, the only sounds the drumming of rain on metal dumpsters and the distant hum of the city. Halfway through, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Then another. And another. Soon 4 men blocked her path. They weren't just random strangers. They had a purpose in their cold eyes, a grim set to their jaws. They were looking for her. Or rather, they were looking for someone connected to her, though she didn't know it yet. "Hey there," one of them said, his voice a low growl that cut through the rain. "You're coming with us. The boss wants a word." Zola's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You have the wrong person," she stammered, taking a step back, only to bump into a 5th man who had come up silently behind her. She was surrounded. "We don't think so," the first man said, grabbing her arm. His grip was like iron. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She fought. She kicked out, her shoe connecting with a shin, and earned a sharp curse. She twisted, trying to break free, her bag of groceries falling to the wet ground, an apple rolling away into the darkness. It was a desperate, furious struggle. One of the men, annoyed by her resistance, backhanded her across the face. The world spun for a second, a bright flash of pain erupting on her cheek. She felt the warm trickle of blood mix with the cold rain. Another man wrenched her arm behind her back, and she cried out as a fresh wave of pain shot through her shoulder. This was it. A deep, primal terror settled in her stomach. They were too strong, too many. Just as a rough hand clamped over her mouth to stifle her screams, the world changed. The alley was suddenly flooded with bright, white light from 2 powerful headlights. A long, black car, sleek and silent like a panther, had glided to a stop at the alley's entrance. The men froze, their attention snapping toward the new threat. The rear door of the car opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the dim light. He didn't run or shout. He simply walked toward them, his steps measured and deliberate on the wet pavement. The rain fell on him, darkening the shoulders of his suit, but he paid it no mind. His face was all sharp angles and quiet intensity, his eyes holding a fire that the rain could not extinguish. This was Siwo. He didn't even look at the men holding Zola. His gaze was locked on her terrified, wide eyes, on the blood welling from the cut on her cheek, on the way her body trembled. The air grew thick and heavy. His men, 2 of them, moved past him like ghosts, and a quiet, brutal efficiency unfolded. There were no loud gunshots, just the sickening thuds of impacts, sharp grunts of pain, and the sound of bodies hitting the wet ground. It was over in less than a minute. The 5 men who had held Zola were now subdued, dragged away into the shadows by Siwoo's men, their fate sealed. Only then did Siwoo approach Zola. She stood frozen, shivering from cold, fear and shock. He stopped right in front of her, so close she could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne over the smell of rain and garbage. He was so still, so powerful. He slowly raised a hand, and with a tenderness that was shocking after the violence, he cupped her uninjured cheek. His thumb, surprisingly gentle, brushed away the rain and tears. Then his gaze fell to the cut on her other cheek. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, when they met hers again, swirled with a storm of emotions she couldn't name. His voice was low, a controlled whisper that carried more threat than any scream. "Who the hell did this to you?" The question wasn't for her to answer. It was a promise of vengeance. Zola could only stare, her lips parted, her breath coming in ragged pants. She was lost in the intensity of his gaze. Without another word he shifted. In one smooth, effortless motion, he bent slightly, slid one arm behind her knees and the other around her back, and lifted her. A small gasp escaped her lips. She was cradled against his chest, her head resting against the damp wool of his suit jacket. He was solid and incredibly warm. Her arms, acting on their own, came up around his neck for balance. He carried her as if she weighed nothing, walking back to the waiting car as if he were a prince carrying a rescued princess, not a dangerous man carrying a stranger from a dirty alley. He placed her carefully on the soft leather of the back seat before sliding in beside her. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud, sealing them in a world of quiet luxury. The driver, separated by a dark partition, pulled away smoothly. The violent alley vanished, replaced by the blurred, rain-streaked lights of the city passing by the window. Siwoo pulled a clean, white handkerchief from his pocket. He so carefully pressed it to the cut on her cheek. "Hold this here," he instructed, his voice now soft, almost a murmur. Zola obeyed, her hand trembling as it covered his for a moment before he pulled his away. He didn't take her to a hospital. He took her to his home. It wasn't a house but a vast, beautiful apartment high above the city. Everything was clean lines, quiet colors, and expensive furniture. It felt more like a museum than a home, beautiful but empty of life. He led her to a large bathroom, fetched a first aid kit, and tended to her wounds himself. He cleaned the cut on her cheek with an antiseptic wipe, his touch feather-light. He gently examined the bruise already forming on her arm. He was focused, his brow slightly furrowed. Zola just watched him, the silence between them filled with 1,000 unspoken questions. When he was done, he gave her a soft, gray sweater and sweatpants to change into, his clothes, which swam on her small frame but were warm and smelled like him. He made her a cup of sweet hot tea in the massive, spotless kitchen. They sat on a large sofa and he finally asked her name. "Zola," she whispered. "Zola," he repeated, and her name sounded like a precious secret on his tongue. "I am Siwoo." Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, her voice still shaky. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable for a moment. "Because no one should ever make you feel afraid," he said simply. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was truth enough for now. He gave her a guest room to sleep in. The bed was the softest she had ever felt. As she drifted into an exhausted sleep, wrapped in the strange safety of this powerful man's home, she could still feel the ghost of his hand on her cheek, the solid strength of his chest as he carried her. The fear was gone, replaced by a confusing, swirling feeling of curiosity and a strange, pulling attraction. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the room. Siwoo had already left, but a kind older woman was there to make her breakfast. The television was on in the background, and a news reporter was speaking in a serious tone. Zola's Korean wasn't perfect, but she understood the key words. The reporter said that 5 known members of a criminal organization had vanished overnight. They were last seen in the area where Siwoo had found her. The news said the police were investigating, but they had no leads. Zola stared at the screen, a piece of toast frozen halfway to her mouth. She knew with a chilling certainty that this was Siwoo's work. He had asked who hurt her, and by sunrise the men who had put their hands on her were simply gone. He had erased the threat not just for now but forever. And in that moment she understood that the man who had saved her was not just kind. He was terrifying. And she was now undeniably, irrevocably tied to him. The days that followed Zola's rescue were a blur of quiet transformation. She returned to her small apartment above the flower shop, to the familiar scent of soil and petals, but it felt different now, like a life that no longer quite fit. The world outside her window seemed louder, more unpredictable, and the memory of the alley was a shadow she couldn't shake. It was a shadow, however, that was now chased away by a single, persistent presence. Siwoo did not call or send dramatic messages. His approach was far more subtle, and for that, Zola was grateful. The first sign of him came 2 days after the incident. A young man in a simple delivery uniform arrived at Sunny Petals, holding a small, elegant box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was not a bouquet, but a single, perfect orchid of a deep, royal purple. There was no cart, but none was needed. Zola knew. It was a flower that spoke of rarity, of unique beauty, and of a quiet, unwavering attention. He began to visit the shop himself, always at the quietest time of the late afternoon. He never stayed long. He would simply appear in the doorway, his large frame seeming to fill the space, and browse the flowers in silence. At first, Zola would grow tense, her heart doing a nervous little dance. But he never pressured her. He would eventually point to her arrangement, a bunch of cheerful sunflowers, a delicate spray of white freesia, and say, "I'll take these." He would pay, their fingers would brush during the exchange of cash, and a jolt, warm and electric, would pass between them. Then he would leave, taking the flowers with him. It was a ritual, a quiet way of saying, "I am here. You're safe. I am thinking of you." The invitation started a week later. A car would appear outside her apartment on her day off. The driver was the same quiet man from the alley, but he was always polite, holding the door for her without a word. He would take her not to fancy restaurants or public places, but to Siwoo's private world. The first time it was for tea in his immense, minimalist living room. The silence should have been awkward, but Siwoo seemed to wear it like a comfortable coat. He asked her about her work, about her paintings she'd mentioned in passing. He listened, truly listened, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. He began to share pieces of himself, small, precious fragments offered like gifts. He showed her his favorite place, a secret rooftop garden hidden atop one of his buildings. It was a breathtaking oasis against the steel and glass of the city, filled with fragrant night-blooming jasmine and soft, manicured grass. It was here, under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, that he told her about his childhood. He spoke in a low, even voice about growing up alone, about the weight of expectations, about the hard choices that carved a boy into a man who commanded fear. "I had to become a rock," he said, staring out at the city lights. "I forgot what it was like to feel the sun." Zola's heart ached for the lonely boy he described. She saw the man he had to become, and she understood the immense cost. Their connection deepened with every shared secret, every quiet laugh. The attraction that had been a faint hum in the background now grew into a resonant chord. It happened one evening in his apartment. Zola was painting at a small easel he had bought for her, lost in the swirl of colors. Siwoo finished a phone call and came to stand behind her, watching her work. She could feel the heat of his body, smell his clean, masculine scent. She put her brush down and turned to face him. The air between them crackled, thick and heavy with unspoken desire. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing over the faint, fading mark on her cheek. His touch was a question. Her eyes, meeting his, were the answer. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss was not a timid brush of lips. It was a collision of two lonely worlds. It started soft, a tender exploration, a silent confession of all the feelings words could not hold. But then it changed. It deepened, grew hotter, more demanding. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against him, and she melted into his strength. Her hands came up to tangle in the hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss tasted of longing, of pent-up passion, of a desperate, shared need for connection. It was a kiss that stripped away all pretense, revealing the raw, hungry man beneath the powerful exterior and the strong, yearning woman behind her gentle smile. That first kiss unlocked a new level of intimacy. Their private world became a sanctuary of touch and whispered affections. They spent long evenings on his vast sofa, not watching television but talking. He would play with her hair, his fingers gently combing through the curls. She would rest her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart, a rhythm that made her feel safer than any locked door. Their kisses became a frequent, passionate language. In the kitchen while making dinner, he would pull her into his arms for a slow, deep kiss that left them both breathless. In the rooftop garden, under the stars, they would share kisses that were both tender and filled with a burning heat, a promise of more. This grown-up love, this spicy connection, was not just about physical passion. It was about the trust to be vulnerable. It was about the way he would look at her when she laughed, as if she had hung the moon. It was about the way she could calm the storm in his eyes with a single touch. Their love was a living, breathing thing, built in the quiet moments. The shared showers where he would wash her back with a surprising tenderness, the early mornings wrapped in each other's warmth, the way they learned each other's bodies not just with hunger, but with a reverent curiosity. He was her fortress, and she was the warm, brilliant light that finally, after a lifetime of coldness, filled his halls. The peace that Zola and Siwoo had built felt as real and solid as the earth beneath their feet. For months, their secret world flourished. Zola's paintings, once filled with soft pastels and gentle scenes, now held bolder strokes and deeper colors, echoes of the passion and security she had found. Siwoo's immense, silent apartment was no longer a museum, it was a home. The scent of Zola's floral perfumes mingled with the smell of her oil paints. Her favorite mug sat in his pristine kitchen cabinet. Laughter, a sound once foreign to those walls, now echoed down the hallways. He smiled more, the severe lines of his face softening whenever she entered the room. They spoke of the future in hushed, hopeful tones. Trips to see the ocean, a studio for her with northern light, a life that stretched out before them, bright and endless. They had built a beautiful fortress around their love, but they had forgotten that fortresses are often besieged. The threat came from a ghost from Siwoo's past. A man named Jun, whom Siwoo had defeated in a brutal business struggle years ago, had finally finished his prison sentence. Jun was a man who nursed grudges like precious jewels, and his freedom was a key turning in a long-locked door of vengeance. He learned of Zola not through complex intelligence, but through simple, cruel observation. He had men watch Siwoo and they saw the change in him. They saw the way he looked at the black woman with a bright smile, the way his entire body seemed to orient itself toward her like a flower to the sun. Jun saw not a person but a weapon. He saw the one perfect, fragile thing he could shatter to make Siwoo feel a fraction of his own pain. The first sign was a single dead rose left on the doorstep of sunny petals. Then a note, slipped under the door of Zola's apartment, written in crude, blocky letters. He can't protect you forever. Fear, cold and familiar, began to creep back into Zola's heart. She told Siwoo immediately, and she saw a transformation in him that terrified her more than Jun's threats. The gentle man she loved vanished, replaced by the cold, hardened boss. His eyes turned to chips of flint. He doubled her security, assigning 2 of his most trusted men to watch her every moment. The doors to their beautiful world were slamming shut, not to keep danger out but to lock her in. The breaking point came one evening. Siwoo sat her down on their sofa, his posture rigid, his face a mask of grim resolve. "Zola," he began, his voice hollow, "you have to leave. I've arranged everything. There's a plane ticket to New York. An apartment. Money. You will be safe there." He spoke of a life for her, a life without him. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that his love was a poison that would ultimately destroy her. He was willing to tear out his own heart to save her life. Zola listened, her own heart cracking in her chest. But as he spoke, something in her solidified. The fear did not disappear, but it was met by a surge of something stronger, a fierce, unwavering love. She stood up, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Siwoo looked up, startled by her defiance. "Zola, this is not a game. He will hurt you to get to me." "Your world is dangerous, Siwoo," she acknowledged, her eyes blazing. "But my world is wherever you are. You're my home. You don't get to send me away to be safe. My safety is with you. My love is my choice. And I choose to stay. I choose to fight for us with you." Her words did not just hang in the air, they shattered the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time, someone was not running from the darkness that clung to him. Someone was choosing to stand in it, with him, because of him. He saw not a fragile flower to be protected in a greenhouse, but a strong, magnificent tree, with roots deep enough to weather any storm. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it felt as if their souls were stitching together. He buried his face in her hair and finally, truly, believed that they could have a future. The plan changed. Zola would not be a pawn to be hidden. She would be the queen, safely guarded at the center of the board. While she remained in the fortified apartment, surrounded by his most loyal men, Siwoo went to war. But this battle was different. It was not for power or territory. It was for peace. It was for a future. He confronted Jun not with an army, but with a final, decisive meeting. He offered him a path away from Seoul, away from their war, with enough resources to start over. It was a mercy Jun did not deserve, but Siwoo offered it for Zola, to prove that he could be more than the violence of his past. Jun, blinded by hate, refused. The confrontation that followed was swift and final. Siwoo ended the war not with a shout but with a quiet, resolute whisper, eliminating the threat to his forever. Weeks later, the city had settled into a gentle autumn. The air was crisp and the sky was a clear, pale blue. Siwoo brought Zola back to their place, the hidden rooftop garden. The jasmine was still fragrant, and the fairy lights twinkled softly in the late afternoon sun. It was here, amidst the beauty they had shared, that he led her to the center of the garden. He took both her hands in his thumbs stroking her knuckles. He spoke of the past not with regret, but as a road that had led him directly to her. He spoke of the present, a life he had never dreamed possible, filled with her light and her love. Then he spoke of the future. He slowly got down on one knee. Zola's breath caught in her throat, her hands flying to her mouth. He looked up at her, his dark eyes shining with a love so pure and powerful it made her heart ache. In his hand was a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, a single brilliant diamond set on a band of warm rose gold, unique and stunning just like her. "Zola," his voice was steady, filled with more emotion than she had ever heard. "You are my rescue. You are my peace. You are my forever. Before you, my life was in black and white. You brought the color. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Will you stay with me and let me love you for the rest of my life?" Tears of pure, unadulterated joy streamed down Zola's face. There was no hesitation. No fear. Only a love so complete it felt like destiny. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, Siwoo. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. It was more than a piece of jewelry, it was a promise, a vow, a new beginning. As he stood and kissed her, a kiss that tasted of promises and a future written in the stars, they knew their story was just beginning. They had faced the darkness and chosen the light. They had found a love that was not just about dramatic rescues or passionate moments, but about the quiet, unwavering choice to build a forever together. Did Zola and Siwoo's journey capture your heart? If you were swept away by their story of fierce protection, passionate connection, and a love strong enough to conquer any darkness, then you won't want to miss what comes next. Subscribe to stay updated on all our future tales of unique romance, where love always finds a way to triumph. Your next favorite story is just a click away.